Advanced Studio Classroom is on the air. Travel with us again today as we take day 2 of our enchanting trip to Switzerland. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today on our journey. So many people like travel articles and they like to go traveling. And as we mentioned yesterday, our teachers all like to go too. And I mentioned especially Pauline, you love to travel.
That's true. It's one of my favorite things.
And isn't this going to be on your list now?
Oh man, I have every time I come to Advanced Radio, it seems like I add another place on my list. I'm going to have to live 3 lifetimes.
That's right. And what about you, Jack? What do you feel? Don't you want to go there too?
Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime.
Anytime. And of course, we have Yvonne who's been there, and it's so nice to have you in class, Yvonne.
Thank you. And also, I can go back to Switzerland any day.
I know. Now, we're reading the article is going to make you kind of think about it, but you got to finish your job at Studio Classroom first, right?
Okay.
At the very least, come back tomorrow.
Yeah, right. We'll take a Euro pass or a Swiss pass. Well, we had a good time yesterday, and can we just do a quick review? What did we talk about mostly yesterday? Can you help us out?
Sure. Well, one of the things we learned about was the terraced vineyards. They just sound really beautiful. And apparently our author has some experience doing wine trails. And the author said of all the ones they've done, this was the most spectacular. So it sounds like an amazing experience.
And what did you find out yesterday, Jack, about in this article on page 24?
Well, we talked about the Swiss Rail Pass or the Swiss Travel Pass that allows you to travel all throughout Switzerland by train, bus, boat, and even visit up to 500 museums. That's really sounds like a good deal to me.
It's worth it. You get your money's worth out of it. Yeah. Yeah, be sure and do that. You don't try to just go and buy a ticket every time. And then you get confused with the money anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, if you travel that way, it's more of a breeze, right?
It's a breeze.
And what impresses me the most is those enterprising monks that laboriously built those stone walls originally to hold the soil up on the slope, but eventually by their surprise that these stone walls actually act as like a heat pad for the grapes. So that allowed the grapes to grow so well and then eventually get this nice wine from this region.
Right. So we did learn some interesting things, but we've got 2 more days for this interesting place. So open up your magazines to page 25 if you have one and listen in as we take the first paragraph of today's lesson.
In what was definitely a jaw-dropping moment, I marveled at the vista that spread out in front of me as the train began to circumnavigate the lake. The azure blue water, surrounded by cragged alpine peaks, sparkled in the afternoon sun. The train rolled past colorful villages, medieval towers, grand chalets, and wooden farmhouses. I arrived in the charming city of Vevey, located directly on Lake Geneva's shores, just in time for dinner in one of the many open-air restaurants lining the town's promenade. I dined on delicate fresh perch, one of 30-plus fish varieties that thrive in the lake's pristine waters, paired with an outstanding local white wine.
Well, here when they talk about jaw-dropping, you say, wow. Open your mouth. Wow. Or, oh. And that's kind of the same as breathtaking, isn't it?
Right. Both of those words refer to a physical response we have to something beautiful or amazing, right? So it just shows how powerful we feel this moment or the beauty of something is. And here it's referring to a moment that they just started to talk about at the end of our article, of our first day of this article. So remember, they were on the train. They had taken the Swiss pass and gotten on the train. As soon as they got off the plane, they started heading towards this place, and then they went through a tunnel, and all of a sudden, as they came out, Lake Geneva emerged in all its glory, and that's the jaw-dropping moment we're talking about.
That's right. And, they didn't just say, well, here we're here, but they circumnavigated the area.
Yeah, and that word circumnavigate, it means to go around something, and you can see a little bit of the word circle, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a circle shape. In this case, the lake is quite long, isn't it? So it just means to go around the edge of something.
To navigate is when you're usually in a boat and things like that, aren't you?
Right, to move around.
But the train went around and around, and the water was beautiful. And azure blue is kind of a blue-green color, isn't it?
And also
water.
like a clear blue sky, that kind of blue, yeah.
And these very big alpine peaks, which is the mountain peaks, sparkled in the sun. Wouldn't that be beautiful? And then look down and see all these villages. That would be jaw-dropping.
Yeah, and it says that the train rolled past colorful villages and medieval towers, grand chalet, and wooden farmhouses. I want to talk about this chalet because it's a very typical wooden houses you find in the Swiss Alps. It definitely has like pointed roofs, but the roofs are wide. And the mountain-like pointed roof, that pointed shape you see is actually the front side of the house. And then so you have windows or doors, and it's very typical to see those houses, especially in summertime, decorated with like blooming pots, like fresh flowers. So it's really beautiful.
I wanted to ask you because when I read travel articles, of course, every author, it seems, wants to write in very colorful language and make it sound like it's the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. Everyone, right? But today we actually have somebody who's been there, Yvonne. So I want to know, do you really think it's as beautiful as they say? Is it really this azure blue water and sparkling cragged peaks with colorful villages? When you read that, do you think, yeah, that captures it?
Pretty much, especially when the weather is nice. I think you see the azure water with reflecting the blue sky. It really is so beautiful that, as I said, sometimes I feel like my heart is aching.
Well, and the farmhouses, when you think of maybe in Montana, your farmhouses might be different. There's a house, and then there's the barn. But in the farmhouses in Europe, sometimes the people live on the second floor, and then the sheep and everybody, they come in on the kind of the first floor. So the farmhouses are a little bit different over there.
That's really interesting. I'm glad you said that. You're right, because I'm from Montana. It's
a different kind of a farmhouse.
Right?
Yeah, and the mountains are a little different from the mountains we see in Asia because most mountains here are green almost all the way to the top. But the Alps here, because it's so high, and also because the region, actually the top one, in the summer, the tips of the mountains are bare. There are no plants, no
it's above
trees.
The tree, right?
Yeah, and sometimes when the peaks are really high, it's still covered in snow in summer. And then you have the green pastures on the slope of the Alps, and that's just very different and very beautiful too.
Yeah, I think page 24 gives you a really nice picture of those craggy, that's when they say this word crag,
right.
You usually think of rocky, jagged peaks, right? Not these. Yeah, to me, often when people refer to mountains in Asia, it never seems like a real mountain
They're
to me.
more like
because
hills.
I'm from Montana, so I want them to go up to a very definite peak and for the top to be all rock and maybe snow and just a few couple trees, maybe at most. But yeah, in other places, like in Asia, frequently it's a little more sloped at the top and it's trees all the way. And that's still a mountain, I understand.
Right.
But it's not a cragged mountain.
No.
You wouldn't say those were cragged mountains.
Right. Well, then finally they arrived at this city. How do you say that city?
Vevey.
Vevey, okay. and they arrived at this, and it's a very charming city. I think all of these places are charming, but they got there just in time for dinner, and they got to eat in an open-air restaurant, and I love that, sitting in the town square in an open-air restaurant. Have you seen pictures of people doing that in Europe?
That is one of the pictures I have in my head of Europe. I have done very little Europe travel, unfortunately. I hope someday I get to do much more. But that is like the quintessential Europe travel picture in my head, is sitting at a cute little cafe outside on cobblestone streets.
And like, because Lake Geneva is so beautiful, so like in Geneva, Lausanne, or Montreux, or Vevey, all these cities, the waterfront by the lakeside are very chic areas where people just like to sit in the cafe or outdoors and just drinking their coffee or wine or eating their meals. It's
I was going to say,
relaxing.
I'm sure people enjoy their wine there, since we already know it's a wine area with high quality wine. That sounds like the place to enjoy it.
And they eat a lot of pork schnitzel, and they love this Wiener Schnitzel, and it's really crispy, and they have good food there.
Okay.
And nice noodles, you'll like it.
Nice. Well, it says they also have some fish. I'm assuming it's freshwater fish in
That's true,
Switzerland.
yeah.
This
From the
fresh
lake.
perch. It says one of 30 plus fish varieties that thrive in that one lake. Wow, that's great.
That's quite a few, yeah.
And from my days of fishing with my grandpa as a young man, I remember our favorite fish was perch. Always
Really?
freshwater perch is some of the most delicious freshwater fish you can get.
That's great.
And before we end this paragraph, I want to mention that the promenade that we mentioned in this town, Vevey, actually goes all the way to Montreux, including the Castle of Chillon. And this very particular walkway is said to be the finest walkway in Switzerland.
Really? Nice. And they have some nice ones in Switzerland. I haven't been on that one, but I've been to Bern and different places in Switzerland, and you walk along these streets and the old cobblestone streets, and you see all these. It's just like you're going back in the century.
Oh man, you might not see me here tomorrow.
You have to finish the program first, one more day before you go. Right. But doesn't that look like a nice place to go, though? It'd be beautiful. Actually, they have, this next paragraph tells us about some of the people that thought Switzerland was so great, and some of them weren't born there, but they moved there. And so let's read about these timeless figures and read about some of the people who found it very fascinating there. Let's take the next paragraph.
Timeless figures. The next morning, a visit to Chaplin's World, one of the town's most famous attractions, was on the itinerary. Located high in the hills above Vevey, the museum is housed in the mansion Charlie Chaplin inhabited with his large family for 25 years. Scattered throughout the museum, visitors can marvel at the human-like wax figures created by the Grevin Wax Museum in Paris, which bring Chaplin, his family, and personal friends such as Sophia Loren and Albert Einstein to life. Interactive displays document his many contributions to the arts.
Now, I always thought about Switzerland. I would never think of Charlie Chaplin, because Charlie Chaplin was British. Where was he born?
That's right. He was actually born in London, England.
In 1889?
Yeah. In the whole other century.
But he lived quite a long time, and he lived till 1977, didn't he?
That's right. And he was a famous actor, comedian. But when we think about comedians nowadays, at least I usually think of somebody who stands up and tells jokes, right? Or maybe they're in funny movies, but a lot of it is the funny things they say, right? But Charlie Chaplin was a famous actor during the time of silent movies. So it wasn't because he told so many great jokes. It's because even when it was completely silent, no words, he could do all these actions that were so funny. Everybody just loved watching him.
Well, he reminds me of another British person who kind of does that now, but then Mr. Bean.
Oh, yeah.
And Charlie
a little
Chaplin,
bit,
they're
yeah.
both British. And Mr. Bean is kind of like that. He does these funny actions and funny face things, and it doesn't matter what he says, he's just very funny. funny.
That's a really good point. I was trying to guess who you were going to say, and I couldn't think who it would be, but that was a good one.
Yeah.
And so the same kind of thing, but in those days they were just developing the movie industry and black and white things and like that. But Charlie Chaplin did so many funny things that people just loved watching him. And sometimes you can see those on HBO movie, or they'll show an old Charlie Chaplin thing. But he was really, really great. He was not only a comedian, he was also a producer, and he was a director and a composer. And, they say that he was the greatest comic artist of the screen, the greatest. But I think Mr. Bean's going to have a close run up.
Maybe.
Right.
I was thinking he's a great one for any people of any language, though, because if you watch it, it's all silent. It's a universal body language experience. So, people from anywhere of any language can enjoy him still if you can find the old clips of him.
Right, but people in England, think about Charlie Chaplin. But it says here that they have this museum. It's housed in this big mansion that he had, and he lived there. How many years did he live there?
25 years.
He lived there for 25 years. So he was from England, but he just moved over there, and he loved that over there. And in the
in
museum,
fact, he died there.
Yeah. What was in that museum?
Well, they have lots of human-like wax figures, and you are greeted, as we see by the picture, of a wax figure of Chaplin as you go in. And they also have some of his family and personal friends, such as Sophia Loren and Albert Einstein.
Okay. Now, these are names that you've probably read about, and most of you aren't old enough to know who they were particularly. But Sophia Loren was a beautiful actress. I think she's still alive. Pretty old now. But Sophia Loren was not only a good actress, she was Italian, and she was a very nice person. I mean, she was just very friendly, and everybody loved her. She was a real hit in her day.
Yeah, well, apparently Charlie Chaplin and her got along really well. Who knew? I didn't know that they were friends, and I definitely didn't know that Albert Einstein and Charlie Chaplin were friends. It's really fun to think about this funny, comical character being friends with this very serious genius, right? I mean, I don't know if personally Albert Einstein was a serious person, but he did some serious work, right? So we put him in this category of scholars who have done some very earnest, serious study, and we don't usually put them together with Charlie Chaplin in our mind.
Well, and he was 10 years older than Charlie Chaplin because Albert Einstein was born in 1879.
Okay.
And he was born in Germany, and he died in 1955. So
interesting. And Sophia Loren was a lot younger. So it sounds like Charlie Chaplin was somebody who could have friends of people of many different generations. I like that. I think that says good things about a person if you're able to have make friends with anybody of any age, any industry.
Never think about Einstein and with Charlie Chaplin, particularly. But, actually, Einstein was this physicist who he developed the theories of relativity and all. You have to study about him when you go to university. And he won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1921 because he explained all this photoelectric effect. And he was way ahead of his time. Very intelligent guy.
And he had crazy hair. So he's the one scientist I can for sure recognize.
Yeah, everybody knows about him. But you really would not associate him at all with Charlie Chaplin, would you?
Definitely. Well, now I do.
Yeah.
Now I will. Now I know.
And so I didn't realize that until I read this, too. And it talks about here they have this museum. And, of course, these wax museums, they have a person, like a statue that looks like them. So you could see them there. And interactive displays show many contributions that these people had to different things and movies. Did you ever go there or not? Probably not.
No, actually, this is a very new attraction, and it's only opened in 2016.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and this museum is pretty big because Charlie Chaplin's house is very big. It's a mansion, and also, there is a 14-hectare park.
Wow.
So it's really a huge premise. And then besides this mansion, there's also a newly built exhibition exhibition hall that is focusing on Chaplin's artistic works.
Oh, neat. So you can actually go and watch some of the works that
So
he
even
did.
though he
That's
was
great.
funny, he was artistic too.
That's
Right. So here
Quite
it
the
says that their interactive displays document his many contributions to the arts. And there's also a multimedia theater on the site.
So be sure and go there. Put that on your list.
It's on the list. It's on
And
the
if you're
list.
on your Swiss Rail Press or your Europass, you can just go there and look at it and go to the next place.
Have any of you guys been to a wax museum or seen like a
I've
very
been to
well
wax
done?
museums in London and different
Madame
places. Have
Tussauds,
you? Yeah.
Right?
Are they really that lifelike? I've
Oh,
never
yeah,
seen
they are
it.
very lifelike.
Really? Mm-hmm. Interesting.
They're nice. And when you go to London, you can go there too.
Okay, all right. I'll add that to the list too.
We've got a lot of places to see, don't we?
Oh, man, the
It's
world's a
fun to
big place.
travel.
Yes.
Okay, so this is kind of one thing that I really was surprised. We're talking about Switzerland, and then we get these people involved, but it shows that it's such an enchanting place that people think, oh, that's a nice place to live. It's a nice kind of a lifestyle. It's not like New York where it's crowded and stuff like that. It's, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is a testament to the attractiveness of that place that it brought people from so many. Obviously, Charlie Chaplin had enough money. He could have picked anywhere in the world to go settle. It wasn't just for a job that he moved there. So there's
Right.
something that really attracted him to Switzerland.
And it's right on the shores of Lake Geneva. And it's always nice to live on a lake. And that's what I like about Seattle. There's 3 or 4 lakes in the city. And my brother used to be working at Boeing's, and he'd come home and go in his house and go out the back door and be on a lake and take his canoe.
Oh, wow. That's
See,
great.
people like to do that when there's lakes. You go to work and they come back, and then you go out in your boat in your lake. Isn't that fun?
There's something very peaceful, I think, especially about lakes. I feel like there's such a
a
stillness
calm,
with
right.
that water, yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, have you ever been on a place where you live by a lake?
Absolutely. I grew up next to the ocean, and many times.
Where was
went
that, Jack?
San Francisco.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Got a lot of water there, too. Yeah, I lived in a houseboat on a lake when I went to high school, and we could feed the ducks in the morning before I went to school.
What? I didn't know this, Doris. You lived on a houseboat?
Uh-huh. When I went to high school in Seattle, Lake Union. Yeah.
Oh, man, we're going to have a whole nother conversation after this radio. I can't believe I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, because my father worked in town, and he had a business, and it was right by the lake, and then we lived in a houseboat on the lake.
Oh,
But
man.
it was kind of fun to feed the ducks in the morning before he went to school.
Well, before I have a whole other conversation with you that has nothing to do with Switzerland, we better get back to our next part,
That's
don't
right.
you think?
But it's fun to live by the water. I think it is. And we got a lot of beautiful lakes in Asia, too. Well, let's get back to this one now, and let's cruise back in time and read the last section.
Cruising back in time. That afternoon, I stepped on board a passenger ferry for a delightfully scenic cruise past famous towns such as the fashionable city of Montreux, home of the renowned International Jazz Festival. My destination was the Castle of Chillon, a formidable edifice built in the 12th century on a rocky island in the lake, which is the most visited historic monument in Switzerland. A detailed brochure, as well as an audio guide, is available to lead visitors through the castle's many chambers, bringing to life the history contained within its walls. Costume knaves and wenches stroll through the castle, adding to the historical ambience, and they are always happy to pose with visitors for a souvenir photo.
When you talk about going back in time, we often say going back in time, but here they say cruising back in time.
Yeah, it just gives you a picture, I think, that maybe we're going to be on a boat or something that's going to take us back to learn about something in history. That's what I would guess from the title, anyway.
And this is one place where I know you want to go because they have the Jazz Festival there. Very famous.
Another
Montreux.
thing you and I both love,
that's
travel
right.
and jazz.
They have famous towns and this fashionable city. Have you ever been to Montreux?
Yes, a couple times.
Okay,
I
tell
don't
us
remember
what's it-
much of it, and I hadn't had a chance to go to the jazz festival, which happens in June and July every year. So, but definitely is a very famous place.
I haven't had a place to go there, but I've seen a lot of, before they made a lot of records and tapes and cassettes of the Montreux Jazz Festival. It's very famous. You'd love that.
I would love that.
So we got to put that on the list too.
All right, let's go together, Doris.
Yeah, that's on the lake there. And then where else did they go? To some castle, right?
That's right. It's called the Castle of Chillon, and it's a formidable edifice. And when something is formidable, well, the definition in our article says you have to fear or respect it. But I just especially think it's large or powerful. And so actually there's a picture of it right above. You can see, wow, it's still quite well preserved, and it does look quite a little bit intimidating. You can imagine approaching it by a boat. And it was built in the 12th century on a rocky island in the lake.
Can you imagine right in the island, there's this big castle. Wouldn't that be great?
It really does get more and more picturesque the more we talk about it. When we were talking about this big, beautiful lake, I did not imagine a castle in the middle of it.
I know. And this rocky island, and it's the most visited historic monument in Switzerland because this great big castle right out in the middle of the lake. Have you been there, Yvonne?
Yes.
You
yes.
have?
Yeah. And actually, the island wasn't too far from the shore. You can actually walk. They built a bridge. So you
Really?
can walk from the shore to the castle. Yeah. And this castle was a residence of Counts of Savoy from the 12th to 14th centuries. So it was built in the 14th century, and then in the following 200 years were owned by Counts of Savoy. And then later, the people of Bern, that's the middle area of Switzerland, came to take over, and eventually the people of this area, Vaud, also came to possess this castle.
I'm so glad you could go there and tell us. Wouldn't that be fun? Well, you're going to talk about that more after class, right?
Sounds good.
But there's a detailed brochure, like a little folder
Handout,
that tells
right?
you a handout, and you can have an audio guide. And as you go through the castle, then they'll tell you what happened here in this chamber, in this room, in that room, and it brings to life the history that's contained within the walls. Now, that in itself would be worth visiting. What did we find through the castle?
Well, this is really interesting in that, normally when they say it brings history to life, I think they're just saying, oh, you see the walls and maybe some old armor and you read about it and you start to kind of imagine in your head what it must really be like. But they take it a step further here. They actually have costumed knaves and wenches strolling through the castle. So they've put, live people in these old costumes.
Look like they were living in that
look
time.
like they lived in that time. So it really does bring it to life, not just in your imagination, but it's right there for you to really feel what it was like.
Yeah, this castle is actually quite different from other castles I visited. It's still well furnished. And then you have like wall paintings, and you have bedrooms that were preserved in the original form. And I definitely remember these costumes, male and female servants. So they're very friendly, so that they're ready to take a picture with you anytime.
Oh, how fun.
This ambience is a good word. It means the place has a feeling of that. And they'll pose for, you can have a picture. Everybody wants photos. And here you can have a photo of somebody that looks like they're dressed in the 12th century.
That's really great. A lot of times, at museums in Europe and other historical places, they don't want you to take a lot of pictures.
Yeah, and it's just on the wall. You don't get to talk to them.
That's
you know?
right. And so I did not picture in my head a furnished castle. I was expecting bare stone walls with some plaques. And now all of a sudden you're saying, oh, with furniture. Oh, and with people dressed up like the part. That sounds incredible.
Put it on your list to go there, and Yvonne's been there. Well, we'll talk about it a little more in review. We have one more day of this exciting place, but it's worth going to, isn't it?
Well, it sure is. Now I know.
Now we know. We'll see you tomorrow, and we'll continue on. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.